Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the show, a new way to fund public schools. A statewide proposal aims to bring in new funding with a focus on classrooms and student opportunity.
Then we turn to a Detroit neighborhood where expectations of revival met the realities of vacancy.
A new look at Detroit's Brightmoor neighborhood shows how residents navigate change in a place shaped as much by who left as by who stayed.
Then in our second hour, we dive into a new documentary that traces Detroit's defining mark on jazz, from the musicians who shaped the sound to the city that sharpened their craft.
Then we head downriver, where a brand new winter festival is helping a community rethink its future.
Organizers wanted to spark connection, pride, and a new sense of place.
Conversations about identity, reinvention, and the ways cities young and old reimagine their future. This is the Metro.
We begin in Detroit schools, where for years, students have carried the weight of decisions that were made far from their classrooms. They've learned in buildings neglected through decades of disinvestment. They've crossed dangerous neighborhoods reshaped by school closures. And they've grown up in a district that spent years under state control. This trauma came from policy decisions that left Detroit students with less than their peers across Michigan. Now, a new ballot initiative, Invest in My Kids, argues it can help repair that history. The campaign proposes a 5% surtax on only the very highest incomes, with the money flowing into Michigan's public schools. The idea is those who have more contribute more, and every child from Detroit to the Upper Peninsula learns in a better resourced school. Supporters say Detroit kids stand to gain the most because they've lost the most. But this will only deliver if oversight is strong and funding is distributed equitably. And getting equitable state funding to Detroit schools has long been an issue. My guest today is Imani Foster with 482 Forward. That's an education justice network organizing families and young people around this campaign. Imani, welcome back.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Imani, before we get into the proposal itself, I want to discuss why Detroit kids could benefit so profoundly from this kind of funding. When you look at Detroit's schools today, what are the clearest signs to you that kids are still living with the consequences of long-term underfunding?
Yeah, I think there are so many signs. I'm like, where do I start? First of all, our school buildings, our school facilities are just in massive dysfunction. When you look at, holes in the ceiling, when you look at gym floors destroyed, when you look at classrooms and sometimes whole floors of a building that are not usable. I read a statement that said that it will cost $23 billion to actually repair school facilities across the state of Michigan. And I'd almost bet that most of that is looking at schools in Detroit, past school buildings, also teachers. We have a massive teacher shortage. And I think a part of it is that we, unfortunately, aren't able to pay teachers as competitively. And also, when you look at resources and programs in specific schools, there are some schools like Cass, like Renaissance, like King, that have, they have a lot going on. And then there are other schools that are mostly considered neighborhood schools, not magnet schools, that don't have as many programs, that don't have as many resources, and that just generally you can see that there is a struggle even when you look at special education. There's a school in my neighborhood called Clark Elementary that's actually a phase-out school because currently there's not enough enrollment for the district to actually continue to fully pay for that school to function when it comes to lights and water and gas and all the things. Because it's so under enrolled, they're now closing different schools because we can't afford to keep open our neighborhood schools and also fund, the other schools that the district has. So there's lots of things I would say that show that our schools are massively underfunded. I mean, we could talk about literacy rates, we could talk about math scores, we could talk about lots of things. But just generally, our school system is also fractured and broken. So, yeah.
And when you say it's fractured and broken, you're talking about neighborhood schools, magnet schools, the fact that, as you mentioned, Clark Elementary is on that list to be phased out. And so there's not this cohesion when we look at Detroit public schools. There are some schools that are doing particularly well. They're the schools that are sought after. Well, there's even more concentration of disinvestment in the neighborhood schools, which adds a lot of extra pressure for parents who are maybe thinking, well, I don't want to send my kid to the school that's easiest to get to because it is so underfunded and because there has been such little attention paid to it.
Absolutely. And I would also add to the fracture and to some of our issues with funding, our schools are also fractured because we have traditional public schools and then we have charter public schools. And so about half of our kids attend traditional public schools and the other half attend charter schools. And so with our students, because we do have per pupil funding, when our school system is so fractured and we have students attending 71, there's like so many different school districts. I wouldn't say 71, there's 71, there's 70 charter schools, and charter schools are their own school districts oftentimes. And so when there is this split between where the funding is going, that also contributes to continued divestment in our public school system, because then there is this split between per pupil funding following students that are in DPSCD and per pupil funding that's going to, Glazier schools or UPrep schools. And so then there's that added layer of fracture.
Imani, when families talk to you about their hopes for this campaign, Invest in My Kids, what do they say they want most for their children right now?
So this campaign is awesome because it actually restricts funding for three really important categories, which is to lower class sizes, to hire and retain quality teachers, and access to career and technical education. And the way that we came up with those three buckets of where the funding could go is exactly like you said, based off what we hear parents saying, that the class sizes are just too big. My student isn't getting the individualized attention that they need, especially our special education students, that we just don't have enough teachers. Our teachers are overworked, underpaid, and also, they don't have the same staff that they used to. Last year, the district had to cut positions like those who focus on chronic absence, like absentee officers. They had to cut positions like classroom support for classrooms that normally would have, a pre-K or a kindergarten would have a teacher and a teacher aide. Currently now, our schools don't have a lot of teachers aide. They've had to cut these positions. And so our teachers being overworked. And then access to career and tech, which is so big because there are some schools that do have access to career and technical education, that have vocational schools. We have, Detroit at Work. We have all these great programs, but not every school has access to that. And so then not every child is able to know that there are other pathways for you, even if you don't want to go to college. And so those were kind of the three categories that we heard a lot about in our communities and that we brought to the forefront of what we hope that this money can be restricted and used for.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. My guest is Imani Harris of 482 Forward. We're talking about Invest in My Kids. It's a statewide proposal that could bring billions more into public schools. Supporters say it could help children across Michigan and especially Detroit students who've lived with chronic underinvestment for decades. So we're looking at the support, Imani, for this campaign. But of course, there are a lot of people against this because some Michiganders believe that they have a good shot at being rich themselves and that taxes will slow them down. How do you respond to someone who doesn't like taxes because, let's say, they believe it hampers their individual work and success, and so they don't want to increase taxes to pay for Michigan's schools?
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because we do have lots of opposition that talks about different things. And I would say when we talk to people who are just generally against taxes, one of the things that we recognize is that for Black people, unfortunately, in this country, we haven't always seen taxes work for us. Right. We haven't been able to have the luxury of saying like, oh, yeah, I see how my neighborhood has benefited from taxes, because for so long our schools have been run down. Right. For so long, our parks haven't looked the best. For so long, our libraries are underfunded. And so we have definitely got to get to the root of why don't we believe that taxes are the way for us to fix the things in our society that we believe are broken. And so one thing that I often bring up is that, first of all, we have this sympathy, I would say, for wealthier individuals when honestly this tax is only going to impact less than 2% of Michiganders, but it could raise $1 billion for our schools. And so I think by us being really clear about, we have a lot of clarity on where this money can be spent, what this money can be used on. And this isn't just, your regular tax that's like, hey, it's just going to schools. And there's nothing clear about how is the funds restricted? How are we sure that they're going to go to the schools? I think this ballot language is very clear that the funds are restricted to go to the school state aid fund to be used and allocated for these particular buckets of things. But also, I think it is about repairing the trust that we have, especially Black folks in Detroit, with taxes, with our government making decisions that actually prioritize us. And so we often tell people, like, this is a starting point, but this is not a silver bullet. Our schools have been divested from for so long that this is just a start, but we have to continue to advocate, right? And so signing a petition is one thing, but we're going to be in Lansing every year after we get this on the ballot, making sure that the things that we have said we want to see, our lawmakers and our legislators are actually following through on. So this is just a start. We got to get the money in the pot, and then we have to continue to advocate for the money to be allocated in the right way.
If this is only going to impact very rich people, why do you think some folks with less money are still skeptical about it?
I would say one point that you raised is very true. A lot of individuals think that they will be wealthy one day. And I also think that a lot of folks, when we just generally colloquially say tax the rich, and we don't say how rich, right? So when you think about rich people, oftentimes a lot of the rich people that we might even know in our everyday life have old money. They don't even actually bring in as much as we're talking about, right? And so that's why it impacts so little amount of Michiganders, because there's only a small percentage of individuals in Michigan who are every year bringing in $500,000 or as a couple bringing in $1 million on top of, the money that they already have. And so when we say rich, we don't just mean your everyday rich, like, hey, maybe you won the lottery, you came up this year. We mean people that will stay rich for the rest of their lives because they have old money and they're bringing in new money. I think another part of the opposition is that there have been a lot of lies spewed from the Michigan Chamber, unfortunately, that this will impact small business owners the most. When on average, small business owners bring in about $50,000 in a year in Michigan. And this is information that's on the Chamber website. And so I think that this confusion and this love that we have for our small businesses, we love our community businesses. We don't want to see them struggle. We don't want to see them shut down. And so I think there's also this truth that we have to tell that this is just, it's not true that this will impact mostly small business owners, because most of our small business owners, after they pay their employees and pay their building fees and pay all their bills, they don't bring in an individual income of $500,000. Even if you do apply as, an S corp, even if you do run your business through yourself, you're not just bringing in $500,000 in 1 year after you have paid all of the cost of your business.
That's fair. I can't say that I know many small business owners who are bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars. My guest is Imani Foster of 482 Forward. We're talking about Invest in My Kids. It's a statewide proposal that could bring billions more into public schools. Supporters say it could help children across Michigan and especially Detroit students who've lived with chronic underinvestment for decades. Imani, if this passes, talk about some of the ways that you see improvements happening for students. What would they actually feel, especially here in Detroit?
Absolutely. So, when we talk to teachers in Detroit, one thing that we hear is that they have classes of 35 and 40 kids. I was just talking to my old teacher at Renaissance High School, which is, by the way, the #1 school in Detroit. And she has classes of 40 in her English class. So I think the first thing that I'm excited to see, because I also experienced that as a student, is students actually getting this individual experience with teachers who are not burnt out, who are not overextended by just trying to manage a classroom and also teach. She teaches high school, but imagine elementary school classes that have 35, 40 kids in them. The next thing, of course, is being able to hire and also retain our teachers, which wraps in being able to also provide more training for our teachers, right? And so I think that they will also see more teachers from their neighborhood, but also being able to have teachers who have more specific training when we talk about trauma-informed education, when we talk about what's going on with ICE right now, right, and being able to know that our teachers are very trained in what's going on to protect our students that are migrant students. When we talk about just anything, right, this crisis that we have in literacy. When I was in high school, I was being taught English by a permanent substitute for my entire 10th grade year. That didn't prepare me for college. That didn't prepare me for the 11th grade. And so I'm really excited for students to actually have teachers in the classroom that are trained to teach them the subject that they are learning, and also trained in a way that teachers also feel empowered, right? Teachers feel empowered to be creative because they have this looped around understanding, and they feel the support from not only the district, but from the state in the way that we're able to pay them and invest in them. And then career in tech, like I said, I'm very excited to see where that goes, especially in Detroit. I believe every school should have a pipeline to vocation, to career and technical schools, and I think that it should start at the middle school level. I think right now, mostly we're doing vocational in the high school level, and I would be really excited to see us expand that in Detroit so that students can start thinking early on about what does life for me look like after
we're running
education.
out of time, so I do want to get to a few more things when it comes
Yes,
to distribution of funding. I mean, supporters say this will help all Michigan kids, not just Detroit's, if the money is distributed fairly. What does fair distribution look like in real terms?
So I believe that fair distribution looks like those who need more getting more. I think there are districts in Michigan right now that are better funded than others. Now, as a state, we are $4.5 billion underfunded. So across the board, whether you're looking at Northern Michigan, the UP, whether you're looking at Detroit, there are gaps in how our schools are funded. However, there are certain cities like Detroit, like Flint, like Benton Harbor, like, the UP, cities in the UP like Sault Ste. Marie that need more. And so we're hoping to be able to work alongside our lawmakers to make sure that our schools and our districts that need more get more. And what that looks like is continued advocacy. Just like we advocate around the school state aid budget every single year, we're going to have to continue to advocate, especially for this funding, how it's spent and where it's sent to. So it's just continued advocacy work.
Imani, I want to end on that note, on advocacy, because you started your advocacy work really young, and now you're mentoring the next generation. What do you tell young organizers about staying in this fight, even when the winds are slow? And we've only got about 30 seconds.
Yes, ma'am. I say that they just need to stick around. When I was 15, I never thought that I would still be in this fight when I was 25. But here I am because the wins come, and the wins are always greater than the losses. And so I just tell them to stick it out. Don't quit. And, there is going to be a win at the end of the tunnel. There always is, even if the win is a lesson.
One more thing in the last 10 seconds here, because we just had a caller who's a supporter of the campaign who said the money will be going toward local property taxes if it passes. Do you know if that's true?
No, that's not true. The money will all go to the school state aid fund to be allocated into the school budget. And that is written in the language of our ballot initiative.
Thank you for the clarification. Imani Foster of 482 Forward, that's an education justice organization based in Detroit. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
It's the Metro on WDET. Up next, we'll discuss what gentrification and population decline have meant for one Detroit neighborhood over the last decade. Stay with us here on the Metro.